All right, and I see some familiar faces in the room. So hello, those who have attended master classes in the past. And if you're new here, welcome. We're so excited to have you. We're going to hop in and get started so we can make the best use of our 30 minutes that we have together today. This is your masterclass all about hosting live exchanges. And this is really intended to be a practical session so that at the end of today, you have everything that you need to go ahead and host your own exchanges live in the room with different groups of people. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Tila Beischer. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I do want to acknowledge that I'm joining from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Silks Okanagan people. I'm a customer program manager here at ThoughtExchange. So I work with partners like you to support with planning of events, planning of live exchanges, and then also host events like this so that we can teach those a little bit more broadly. So here's what we're going to do with our time together. Our real learning outcome for you today is that you know when to use a live exchange, how to promote it really successfully, and then the technical side. So how do we set it up and how do we actually host it while we have people here? We also are going to spend a little bit of time talking about the planning of a live exchange. So what are the things that you need to keep in mind when you're working on your planning process? And then we're going to hop into the product and do a tutorial together so that you see everything as we're going. We're going to wrap up with a Q&A, which will be our live exchange. So you can see what it's like and experience that. So let's hop in and talk a little bit about the why or the when you would use a live exchange. And really what we're seeing and what we're hearing right now is almost a need to reinvigorate virtual and live meetings. Virtual meetings have been happening for a year now, a little over a year, and we really want to find a way to make them more exciting and worthwhile. And so part of this is having the opportunity to have everyone in the room add their voice to the event or to the meeting that you're hosting, and to be able to really consider all of the voices to access diverse perspectives in your organization and to be really gathering input to make sure that everything in the event is something that an attendee is looking forward to. A live exchange only takes about 10 minutes, so you're able to demonstrate listening and have that interactive element in 10 minutes. It makes something that would have taken hours. Imagine a town hall where you're asking everyone in the room's opinion on a topic that you're discussing, and then how much everyone agrees with that person, how long that exercise would take. The live exchange really makes it more efficient for you and for everyone who's attending as well. They really support to order your thoughts and to support with prioritization. So imagine that you were hosting a live exchange as a follow-up to a presentation that you just gave, like what we're going to do today, and you are asking, what are your questions about what we just learned? What that will mean is that, sorry, just got a notice. All right, we have someone new who's just joined. Hello. So we're just chatting a little bit about why and when to use live exchanges and what the benefits are. So we were just talking about prioritization, that it does really help you to understand what's rising to the top. What does the group really want to talk about? Which means that you can drill down and guide a really meaningful conversation or have a really meaningful event based on what people really want to talk about. And you can look at the list of thoughts that are coming up next to stay organized so you know what you'll be talking about next. This all really is the results of scaling a group discussion. So you're taking a conversation that would have been with 10 or maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people, and having it hosted in ThoughtExchange so that it's more efficient and scaled. And let's talk about 3 examples of when you can really use a live exchange to enrich a meeting. And one thing that you can do is to support with the planning of an event. So a really good example of this is something that we do internally here at ThoughtExchange with our teams is we sometimes will host a live exchange at the start of our meeting to ask what is the most important thing we need to talk about today as a group. And then we'll actually use the thoughts that come up that rise to the top to create the agenda. And this allows us to have a meeting agenda that is aligned with the priorities of the team, and then leadership is able to respond to and address those. Another way that you can use ThoughtExchange for live exchanges really effectively is for a Q&A after a presentation. So what are your questions? What else do we need to talk about? And you can also use it as a wrap up to cement learning. So after a professional development day or after a seminar, how are you going to take what we learned today and apply it to your work? Another thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is if you're typically used to hosting exchanges in an asynchronous setting and you're interested in boosting up your participation, is to have people participate in your exchanges live. So maybe you are doing a tour of your organization and you have a week where your exchange is live and you're hopping into different team meetings or different department meetings, asking people to participate in a live setting. The reason we encourage that is you almost always will have more participation in a live exchange than in an asynchronous exchange. And that's kind of the nature of the game, is that when you're in a meeting with people, be that in person, be that on Zoom, wherever your organization is at right now, that there is a bit of an accountability piece of, okay, I can see that only 10 people are in the exchange. We're going to wait another 2 minutes and let everyone else hop in there as well. So you can build and boost up those numbers a little bit too. All right. So thinking a little bit about planning and what to really keep in mind when you're planning for a live exchange, there's kind of 3 details. So there's the administrative side. Do you have the exchange planned? Do you have the support lined up? Do you know how to screen share on the platform that you're using? If you're live in the room, do you know how to use the presenter that you're going to be using? The second component is designing the exchange. And so this is actually to set the exchange up well in advance of the event. So have your question decided upon, have your survey questions outlined, set it all up in your account so that when the event starts or the meeting starts, you're just ready to go and share your screen. And when you're thinking about the why of why you're hosting this exchange, really consider, how does this fit into the event or the meeting? And how does this really add value to it or enrich it? And so a good example of that is if you were going to have a Q&A exchange in a meeting, but you didn't actually have any time in that meeting to respond to what came up in the Q&A, it could feel like you're missing a bit of an opportunity. So if you're going to have a Q&A exchange, that you are going to block a little bit of time after that exchange to respond to the top questions that came up. The third piece here is all about planning for your technical setup. That is really knowing that you know how to use the screen share tool or the software that you're using, that you have your Wi-Fi all prepped and ready to go, and that maybe you've practiced with presenter mode before or hosting a live exchange. You could practice with a smaller group of your team or your employees so that you know what you're going to do before you roll out to a larger group. The last piece that I will encourage you to think about is, who are your participants and have they used ThoughtExchange before? So if this is a group of people who are brand new to ThoughtExchange, you are likely going to need to add a little bit of extra time to introduce them to the software. This is ThoughtExchange. Here's why we're using it, and here's how we're going to implement it today. And I'll share this out afterwards, but here's a handy step-by-step for hosting your first successful live exchange. First is to start with your objective. So why are you hosting it? What is the question that you're asking? How are you going to use it within the event? To consider your timing. A live exchange typically takes 10 to 12 minutes. So do you have 12 minutes in your meeting to block, to participate, and to respond to questions? Is there anything that you need to shift around? Do you feel like it's better served to kick off the event, say if you're using it for agenda setting, or to wrap up if you're using it for key insights? The third piece here is all about audience. Who are they? Have they participated before? Prep is making sure you've got everything set up. Respond is, if you're hosting a Q&A exchange, for example, do you have the right panelists on the call to answer questions that might come up? And do you have a plan for how you might respond to them? And then this final piece is technical. And this is something that I will encourage you to do if you're hosting a larger live exchange and it's one of your first few, is perhaps have one of your colleagues on the call with you, prepared to do a little bit of tech support if people have questions or they're asking in the chat, how do I get into the exchange? All right, with that, we're going to move into a little bit of a tutorial. I want to show you how to host a live exchange, and we are also going to use this for our Q&A component. So we're all used to this area here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. This is our exchanges view in our ThoughtExchange room. And what's really wonderful about a live exchange is you can host any exchange, live or asynchronous. So if I already had this exchange live and I was looking to host it, I could just click here, click on these three dots and then click on present. We're going to go through how you would actually create one today. So I'm going to click on create new exchange and we'll just manually set it up. I'm going to give it a title. So August 17th, 2021 Masterclass Live Exchanges. And I'll give it an objective as well. Remember, objectives are an opportunity for you to be able to reflect back on what types of exchanges you were running and were you successful. And this one, I'm going to say that we are looking at developing talent. Question, I'm just going to ask you, what are your thoughts and questions about hosting a live exchange? And I'm going to point out as well a couple details when you're thinking about exchange design and your live exchanges. One is to be cautious about setting a deadline. You don't want the deadline to go off while the meeting is happening, or if your meeting gets postponed and you forget to adjust the deadline, make sure that you go in and edit that. Oftentimes, we will coach leaders to not set a deadline for a live exchange and just to manually close it instead. The other thing for a live exchange is you don't need to write a written introduction because you are verbally going to give the introduction. And we even have a script for you. So if you were to search script in our help site, you see we just have the widget there and click on live exchange script. We have a script that you can use to talk through while you're hosting. Go. And then the other 2 points that I will show are that with survey questions, which you'll remember are either demographic or opinion close-ended questions, you want to avoid asking too many survey questions in a live exchange. And the reason being for that is that it takes people a while to get through those survey questions. So imagine if you had 15 minutes blocked for an exchange in your meeting, but you asked 10 survey questions. What you're probably going to find is that those first 5 minutes of that time period are actually eaten up by people answering the survey questions. So ask just 1 or 2. If you need to ask more than that, then be sure to add buffer time in to give people time to answer those in a really thoughtful way. All right, I'm also going to point out as well not to use participation grouping with live exchanges. It will show the whole exchange as opposed to the single participant group. So we do not recommend using participation grouping with any live exchange. I'm going to click on launch here, launch an invite, and show that from this screen here, you can click on present your exchange, and this will open up presenter mode. And presenter mode is what we call the tool where you can host the live exchange from. So it's going to prompt you of how to use this tool. You can click on this present button, and then it opens up this view of here is a QR code where people can join. We have a timer function up here, and we can also move to different slides. So I'm going to encourage you to participate in this exchange now, and then we're going to go through the different views together. And there's 2 or 3 ways to get into this exchange, depending on the device that you're using. So the first is you can join using this QR code in your mobile phone. So if you want to hold your phone up and open your camera and join using the QR code, you can join from your device. If you want to join from your internet browser of the computer that you're on right now, open the chat and click on the link that I posted there. And you too can do that. So you can prompt people. We are using ThoughtExchange. This is a tool to have a large conversation and to set priorities together. Please join using the QR code or check the link in the chat and click on there and join there. The other way that people can join is by going to tejoin.com and typing in this 9-digit code. And I'm going to point out for you that we can see you joining right here. So look, we're up to 4. We have 9 of us on this call together today, and you can hop in and join and let us know in the chat if you're having any issues getting in there. I'm just going to wait until we're up at 8 or so before we move to the next step. Okay. So once you can see that about 50, maybe 60% of your audience is in there, I want you to click on play on the timer. And you can see that that starts moving over up here in the top right. And that's to prompt your participants. All right, you now have 4 minutes to share and rate the thoughts of others. So if all of you, you can even write in test if you want, or you can write in questions too. You can see there are some thoughts rolling in. Perfect. And then once you can see that there are a couple thoughts, you're going to click on this over button. See down in the bottom right, it says next slide. That pulls up our connections view. And so I can see each of you joining the exchange, and then the icons are thought bubbles. So we have 3 thoughts, we have 3 thought bubbles. And once you start rating, we're going to see lines and connections being made. Oh, some great questions popping in here. Perfect. And there's a couple tips when you're thinking about hosting. One is that if you're not seeing many thoughts pop up yet, to prompt people to please share 1 thought each. And that can feel like a reasonable amount to ask from everyone. Please share 1 thought each. And then rate as many thoughts of others. The other tip that can be the absolute hardest is not talking through a live exchange. Because we're doing this as a little bit more of a tutorial today, I am talking through your participation time. But if we were hosting this and I was hosting it as an event, I would likely be much quieter, not be talking through too much to give people time to think. Oh, and there's some great tips that are coming up in here as well. Perfect. So a couple things that you can do once you have people participating in the exchange. One is you do have these timer functions up in the top right to add or remove time. So if I saw, okay, I'm halfway through and I have no thoughts coming in and no rating moving, maybe I'm going to cut time because I think that people are done. Or if I'm getting messages in the chat saying, oh, I need more time, I can click on the plus icon here and add an extra 30 seconds. So you can be fluid with that. And when you're planning your presentation amongst your exchange and your agenda, give yourself a little bit of buffer time to allow for that. I'm going to take off 30 seconds here because I just added 30 seconds. And when you're about a minute, you're going to want to prompt your participants. If you have not done so already, please move into the rating step and rate as many thoughts as you can before our time runs out. All right. I'm going to move down to 0 seconds because we've quieted down a little bit. And I'm going to click on the over arrow to look to this last view. This is the working with results or the view results view, and it allows you to talk through what came up in the exchange. One tip that can be handy if you're working with a larger group is to actually close the exchange when you get to this view. So you can click on the close exchange button. And what that does is it means that people cannot rate any more thoughts. So these thoughts are going to be, they're not going to shift around. They'll be solid, they'll be set in their order. If people were continuing to rate while you're talking through, we would watch these shift around and it would kind of be a little confusing to navigate the conversation. So let's dig in here and answer as many questions as we can in the next 11 minutes. You can triple click on a thought and expand it to be the whole view. This is really useful when you're guiding a conversation around what came up in the exchange to focus in on a single thought. So this top thought is, I find having someone running the screen sharing while I facilitate the conversation is easier. Absolutely. We have lots of partners who will use live exchanges in this way. They'll have their technical side. So someone is running the screen share moving through, and then someone else is talking through and facilitating the conversation. When it comes to those facilitation pieces, we do have that script to support you for your first few, but eventually you'll find that it just becomes natural and you'll likely introduce it to different groups in different ways. So internally, if your department uses exchanges quite often, you won't need to have as large of a prep speech about what is this and why are we using this tool. But if you were using it, for example, with customers or with external organizations, you would want to spend more time speaking to the value of the exchange and why you've embedded it in your event. Moving down to the next question. Once it is set up, does it just take going to the link and choosing presentation? Yes. Let me show you exactly how that functions. So you are in your exchanges view, and we have our exchange right here. To get to it once it's set up, all you need to do is click on the 3 dots next to the exchange and click on present. Click on present and then present again. And then this is the view that you will screen share, which you can see it led us right back to exactly where we were. All right, ideas for troubleshooting technology challenges of participants. Absolutely. If it's a big group, have someone else on there with you to be supporting the tech side. We do have help articles for getting into a live exchange. And another piece that we can find that people bump into is that they aren't actually clicking on the link and opening it up in the correct browser. So that could be a piece to keep in mind. I think another piece too is as we start looking at coming back together in person, and I've heard of some organizations are back together. For example, one of our school district partners who we're working with is using a live exchange for their kickoff day with all of their teaching staff, and they're going to be in person. And so what they're doing is printing out the QR code and putting it on the tables within that room so that those at the back of the room are able to join using the QR code as well. You can be strategic about that too. And if you are live, maybe you have a couple people floating through, helping people get through exchanges. All right, besides a good question, how can we make live exchanges more engaging, incentives, etc.? Some people play music during live exchanges. I think people are about 50-50 split on that. And I think it really does come down to the positioning of the live exchange within the event. So are we doing this as a way to add value for the participant or because we need a data set at the end? And oftentimes both are true, but when you're promoting it to participants, you want to be promoting it from the perspective of this adds value for you in the participation of the event. So having it kind of positioned as a value add will allow for more participation. Another thing that we do see people do when they're starting to use live exchanges is to be using them on those strategic projects that they're doing, but also be using them maybe for lighter touch or team building exercises too, so that people are able to have really positive interactions with the tool. A good example of that is a partner who I worked with who used a live exchange to create a leadership playlist, and they use that playlist to kick off all of their meetings so that they are all seen and they kind of hear their own songs playing, and it's a little bit engaging for them. How big a group should use a live thought exchange? First attempt to ask with a mess. Oh, I saw that one down there. But how big a group, it can really depend. So you can have as small a group as 10, and you could scale up to hundreds and or thousands. When you do have a larger exchange, there's a couple things to keep in mind. The first is that the connections view is going to tap out at 75. So once we have 75 people icons, it's just going to pulse and it won't be updating live. And that's to save bandwidth on your end so that the computer isn't over processing. The other thing too is to keep in mind the themes with larger exchanges. Sometimes it can be more valuable to look at the auto themes that come up in the Discover dashboard as opposed to the list of thoughts if you were to have thousands of people in there. I always say start with a smaller group while you're getting used to it and then scale up as over time. Any experience using this in places with little connectivity, i.e. Canada's northern community. So you do need an internet connection to participate in a exchange. It does not take a large amount of bandwidth or data. So if people were joining on Wi-Fi or on mobile, they are still able to join. They'll just need to be able to connect to that. If you have people without connectivity and you're planning to host a live exchange, you could think of doing it at a public space once it is safe for your community or your group to do so. So a lot of the times we'll see people doing those at town halls or, as I mentioned, at kickoffs, at meetings together so that they can be using public Wi-Fi as well. What are the main differences or outcomes of completing a live exchange to a non-live? Participation. Absolutely. Live exchanges almost always have more participation. I'll give you an example. There were 10 of us on the call when we started the live exchange, and we had 7 of you join. All of those who joined shared thoughts, and we had 57 ratings. If I had emailed this out to you in advance and you were trying to check it off while you were busy going amongst your day preparing for this, likely we would have had half or 60% of that participation. So if you're hosting an exchange and you do really want to boost up the participation, think about, can I do this live? I think the other piece to the differing outcomes of completing a live exchange are the interest in data sets as well. With the live exchange, you have the opportunity to do a piece around closing the loop on the data while you're with that group. So what we're doing today is we're talking through what came up in the exchange. I'm closing the loop with you while we're on this event, as opposed to sending out a report in a week or so. So people start to see that real validation of the value of participating in an exchange. All right, let's move to the next thought here. When do you suggest moving on from a live exchange when you can see lots of activity and it isn't slowing down and it has been 10 minutes? Should we keep it interactive for those who have finished? Absolutely. Sometimes people will want to add more thoughts in. What I always recommend is keeping it really time bound and going by that time that you set. Add an extra couple minutes if you want to respond to the thoughts. But if you are adding an extra 10 minutes onto an exchange, for example, those who participated at the start won't be paying attention by the end of it. The other benefit with being really clear of it within the introduction or the agenda that you're setting with your participants or your attendees is that they have an expectation of how long that they have to participate. What we will see a lot of people doing is leaving the exchange open after the event and sending it in a follow-up email. So let me give you an example of that. That's something that we saw done recently at a professional training. Was they used the exchange at the very end. How are you going to cement your learning? The question was something like that. Everyone participated to wrap up the event, and then that was also sent in the follow-up email so that people could continue participating. And that's valuable because not everyone is necessarily able to be at a live event, and people may be watching the recording and then want the opportunity to participate in the exchange. You can consider a mix of both. All right, how big a group do we use? Oh, we already answered that one. Perfect, so we made it through all of the questions in the live exchange. Thank you so much for participating today and taking 30 minutes out of your day to learn all about how to host these. Remember, the key takeaways are you can host it with groups of 10 and up. Start with your team, test it out, and build up from there. And to get to live exchange, any exchange can be live. Click on those little 3 dots next to it and then click on present. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and learn about this. Hope it was really valuable for you. We're hosting a masterclass next week all about working with results. Same day, same time, and we'll send you an invitation to that if you're able to join. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day, rest of your week, and happy exchanging. Take care, all.